Hi folks, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be painting lesson 2 in the Watercolour Trip to Italy painting book that I started last week. If you haven't seen the video for that lesson, I'll put a link in the card above, as well as a link to the unboxing video of this kit so you can go and check them out after the video. Today I'm going to be painting this pretty plant pot on a wall in Venice. Don't forget, if you like this video, to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new around here, please consider subscribing to my channel where I post twice weekly videos on all things art related. So on the right hand side we have two identical outline drawings of the flower pot to give us two attempts at the painting, and like before I'm going to use washi tape to protect the second sketch and give a nice defined border between the two. I've also got two jars of clean water ready, one for washing dirty brushes and the other for rinsing and adding washes to my painting. This keeps watercolours nice and bright and clear and prevents colours from looking dull or muddy on your paper. I'm also continuing to practice with the two round brushes that came with this set, a size 6 and a size 1. And lastly, before we start, I thought I'd show you the state of the palette that came in the kit after last week's painting. I did try to clean it off as soon as I'd finished, and I am going to use it today, but as you can see it's pretty stained. Next time though I'll have to use my own palette, as it's going to be pretty hard to see what colour I'm mixing with all that going on underneath. Okay, so something I wanted to do differently this week was to take a few minutes to look at the reference photo on the far left and compare it to the artist's impression on the right. You can see that the artist's painting is a fair bit brighter and that a few details have been left out and a few bits have been added. Composition is something that I'd like to improve in my own artwork, as I generally don't think to make any changes. I would typically just paint the picture as it appears in the photograph, so it's interesting to see what the artist decided to keep or leave out and what he decided to add in to get a balanced composition. Right, observations done, let's get painting. So step 1 is to wash the plastered walls with a mixture of yellow ochre, cadmium red and cadmium yellow. And there are 3 water droplets here, which means to use plenty of water. It also says partly into wet with cadmium red. So I'm going to use the larger of the 2 brushes, that's the size 6, to mix those 3 colours together. We're not told how much of each colour to mix, so rather than use an equal amount of each like I did last week, I tried to gauge for myself what I thought was right. So I added less of the stronger cadmium red and more yellow ochre, but I thought it was quite hard to judge, especially considering the tendency for watercolours to dry lighter. I decided for the wash to pre-wet the paper like I'd normally do for the wet in wet technique, but this was a bit of a slow process with this size 6 brush. I'd normally use a bigger one but wanted to stick with what came in the set. Having said that, there's no rule that states I can't use my own brushes, and ultimately one of the reasons I bought this kit in the first place was to gain confidence as well as improve. So perhaps in future paintings, if it makes sense, I might try using a different brush or two, as it's all about learning from mistakes and trying new things. When applying the wash, I consciously tried to go darker to account for the watercolour paint drying lighter, and although my application technique was a bit patchy, I was hoping that using the wet in wet method would help to even it out a bit. The other option would be to try and create an even flat wash using a continuous bead of water, but since this is a stone wall, it might have looked a bit too uniform if I'd done that. The instructions also said to add cadmium red here partly into wet, which had I done a perfectly even wash might not have looked as natural. Okay, so the next part of step 1 was to wash the brick part of the wall with cadmium red and cadmium yellow. And this is one of the artist's additions, as there wasn't a wall here on the reference photo. Now here it looks like I'm mixing green in with the cadmium yellow, but this is just a dried on stain from before, and it does show how difficult it is to see what colour you're mixing on a dirty palette. I'm definitely going to use my own palette next week. and before we did anything else we had to let this all dry. Now we're ready for the last part of step 1, which is to wash the flower pot with a 3-colour mix of VB, which is burnt umber, cadmium yellow and cadmium red. And the key says to use less water here to get a darker value. Again here I kind of guessed on the proportions of each colour and added in a bit more burnt umber to try and match up with both the photo reference as well as the artist's example. With the basic wash done, I then went in and added still more burnt umber to try and increase the value here, as it still looked like it needed darkening up quite a bit. Next we're on to step 2, and we have to first wash the flowers with a 2-colour mix of cadmium yellow and cadmium red with an average amount of water. This is shown by 2 water droplets on the key and is a bit vague, but I'm going to use the picture reference as a guide to see what colour value we need. I noticed this was the same colour mix as for the brick wall, but obviously the flowers are more red than that, so I'll have to add in a bit more cadmium red than cadmium yellow. And I kind of judge it as I go along, adding in a bit more red if I think it's needed. I also changed down to the smaller size 1 brush here, so I could add in the smaller details of the flowers more easily. Now we have to add the cast shadow on the wall using a mixture of CM, which is Madder Lake Deep, Ultramarine and Yellow Ochre. The colour mix here seemed to look dark enough on the palette, but I didn't think it showed up as dark on the paper compared to the example. But there is a second part to this stage, which to be honest I found a bit confusing, and I'll show you that when we get to it next. Right, so the next part says to pool a stain from top to bottom, leaving a drop of water coming down. Well, I didn't really know what this meant, and the more I read it, the less I understood, but I often tend to overcomplicate or overthink things, so I just mixed up some more of the 3-colour mix, and using more water than before, added in more value to the shadow, which I thought it needed anyway. I wasn't sure if this was a separate step or if it was an extra instruction to help with the painting of the shadow in the first place, so I just muddled through as best I could. I did ad lib it a bit and dropped in some of the plant pot colour left over on my palette to the bottom part of the shadow, as this is what I could see on the reference picture. I didn't however leave any drops of water coming down as it said in the instruction, so yeah, I think I just left that bit. Now moving on to the leaves and another 3-colour mix of Viridian, Cadmium Yellow and Cadmium Ochre. And this is where it shows I've still got a lot to learn, as if I were doing this painting without these instructions, I'd probably just have chosen olive green rather than mix up 3 colours. But I'm kind of getting to realise that by mixing the same basic colours together in different proportions, it can help to keep the painting cohesive and harmonious. For the last part of step 2, we just have to add some colour to the brick wall using the WATERCOLOUR or watercolor method, which basically means adding in different colours to the same area without allowing them to completely mix. This way the different colours can be seen separately, which adds interest to the painting, and again we're sticking to the same colours as before with yellow ochre, cadmium yellow and cadmium red. Being able to build up transparent layers like this is one of the things I really love about watercolour, but that said, I think my initial wash on this brick section of the wall was far more yellow than the guide painting, so I could probably do with adding in a touch more cadmium red in that step when I try it again second time round. So we're on to the last step, step 3, and here we have to add some core shadows to the flowers using a mixture of the Madder Lake Deep and Ultramarine. And it was here I realised that I didn't actually have that many flowers to add shadows to, so that's something else to try and remember for my second attempt, add in more flowers. Nevertheless, I like that this colour is very similar to the shadow cast on the wall under the flower pot, minus the yellow ochre obviously, but I think it pulls the composition together really nicely. For the next stage, all we have to do here is add some darker accents to the bricks with Burnt Umber and the Madder Lake Deep. You might have noticed my bricks aren't exactly the same as the guide painting, but I did seem to have a larger area of brick wall on my painting than they did, so I had to improvise a bit. Now it's time to add some shadow to the flower pot with Burnt Umber and Madder Lake Deep. Okay, only 2 more bits to do now, we are almost there. So we just need to add some darker shadows to the leaves using a mixture of Viridian and Burnt Umber. Now, unlike the flowers, I seem to have plenty of leaves, so enjoyed adding in the darker green values to add some contrast. I'm using the small size 1 brush for this area, which allowed me to add in smaller detail as well as the indication of a few thin branches here. Okay, we're on to the last and final step for this painting, and that's to add in the darker mount for the flower pot using a 3-colour mix of burnt umber, raw umber and Madder Lake Deep. I was hoping to mix a really dark value here, as this is the darkest part of the painting, but I did struggle to get it dark enough for some reason, so I'll need to try and improve on this in my second attempt. So this is the finished first attempt, and there were bits that I liked and bits that I need to improve on. If we look at the author's version, mine looks a lot lighter in comparison, and I think I need to try adding more value to the marks on the wall next time. But I do like the brightness of my picture as a whole, and I think the contrast helps to add depth. I definitely want to add in a few more of the red flowers next time, as well as a darker shadow under the flower pot. And despite the slightly confusing instructions for pooling the colours for the cast shadow on the wall, I do really like the multicolour effect we got, and think I might try and emphasise this more in the next one. So I'm going to put this second attempt into a time lapse, as the steps are the same as before, but I'm going to try and make a few adjustments to try and improve on the parts I wasn't too happy with on the first attempt. For the initial wash, I wanted to go slightly darker on the stained areas of the wall, and I wanted to make the brickwork slightly less orange, so I did that by adding in a touch more cadmium red. For the plant pot, I wanted to get a more saturated colour to begin with, so I added slightly less water. And as I mentioned earlier, I wanted to add more of the red flowers this time, and made them a bit stronger in colour on the first wash too. I did end up really liking the cast shadow on the wall, but wanted to make it a bit stronger on this attempt, to add the contrast I thought was lacking in the last one. For the brick wall, I still don't think I achieved the more reddy colour I was aiming for, but I did try and add in a bit more variation to the brick detail. I also think I should have taped off the right hand side of this painting, as I think it looks a bit too wide compared to the artist painting, and as a result made the flower pot look too small, so that's something to bear in mind for next time. On the whole though, I did feel pleased that I'd improved on this second attempt and really enjoyed the process, but I still think I prefer the lighter, brighter wall colouring on my first painting. One final thing I did decide to add was a bit more shading to the right hand side of the plant pot after comparing my painting to the reference photo, as well as studying the process pictures painted by the author. Let me know which painting you prefer in the comments box below, and if you like this video, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Hit the bell icon as well if you want to be notified as soon as I upload a new video. Thank you so much as always for all your support, it really does mean a lot to me, and I'll look forward to seeing you all again in the next video. Thank you for watching, take care and have a great weekend. Bye!